So my name is Chad Brooks, and I'm a Congregational Developer in the Louisiana Conference of the United Methodist Church. And what I want to talk with you today in this video about is mission in your local church. And more specifically, I want to give you 3 questions to ask to help you discern what might be the missional priority of your local congregation. Editing Chad from the future, I realized when editing this video that this was actually really powerful, really important, and I care so much about you understanding this, I actually created a free 1-page worksheet to help you with what I talk about in this video and also to trim down hours of time about what it might mean to use these concepts in your local church with your local leadership. So if you want that, make sure to check out the links below in the description to grab the missional priority worksheet. Back to the video. So if you like content like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And also, I write emails specifically about normal size church growth. You can subscribe to those in the description down below. Now, in the last year, I've written 2 books. One is called Is My Church Healthy? And it's about a framework for understanding church vitality. And the other one is a little tiny ebook called On Mission in the Inward Church. And in both of those books, I talk about why this matters so much to the local church. In Is My Church Healthy? What I talk about is the dynamic of when mission is really only done by a handful of people in the church, and it functions almost like an extracurricular activity. And in my book On Mission in the Inward Church, I talk about what does it mean to shift an inward church by understanding the mission of Jesus Christ is given to us in the Great Commission, but that why mission has to be an overarching feature of the local church. Last few weeks, I preached for a friend of mine, and we were in Luke 10, the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I focused really on the conversation that Jesus was having with that religious leader. And what I ended with was this: it's important to touch what we can touch, and it's important to affect what we can affect. All that to say is we can think about things globally. We can become stressed out over issues of mercy and justice that we find. But as Christians, this kind of takes on this mandate that Jesus gave us in Acts 1 of Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. Our Jerusalem is what matters so much. And our Jerusalem is really where the local church finds so much transformative power of how it can enact the kingdom of God and bring the good news of Jesus Christ to the places around it. But so many local churches, we struggle to understand our Jerusalem. We struggle to understand what are the things that are right in front of us, the things that we can touch, the things that we can affect the most. And this is really what I want us to hone in on about those 3 questions. Now, a couple of terms I want to define first. There is a handful of terms that get used in a somewhat generic fashion, and I feel like we really need to have a laser-focused idea of those. Those terms are mission, outreach, evangelism, justice, mercy, all of that. We kind of use them interchangeably, and that's a mistake. I talk about that on Mission and the Inward Church. They need to have a clear-cut definition, and the clear-cut definition I'm going to give you, at least for 3 of those terms, is this: that mission is the overarching energy and focus behind the entire global church, big C, but also for a local church. There's a unique understanding of mission. There are people and places that only you can reach in your community, that you are the best person to reach the people that you know. So mission has to be thought of as this broad, encompassing dynamic. Now, I'm not going to talk about evangelism in this video, and I think the term outreach is just a super generic term. We should ditch that term. But mercy and justice, those are unique pieces, and there's some confusion points, especially depending on what denominational tradition you're part of. And depending on which denominational tradition you're part of, you might be actually really scared or not even want to touch those 2 words, but they're unique. So a ministry of mercy. Mercy is when we say there is a known issue in my community, and I have the ability to positively rectify it or affect it. Mercy are the things that we know there's something wrong going on, and we have the ability to touch it. Justice is somewhat related, but justice is when there's a known issue, we know there's a problem, but we cannot solve it, and we might not even have the agency to affect it that powerfully. But what we can do is we can give witness to the fact that this is a problem, and we can call on those who do have the agency and ability for them to focus on it and for them to work on it. So those two somewhat the same, but clearly defined definitions of mercy and justice. That's really what I want us to think in. So let's talk more about the mercy piece right now. These sorts of things cannot just be extracurricular activities of the local church. They cannot just be, well, a handful of people in the church really like to quilt, and so we're going to quilt blankets and try to find kids to give these blankets to. Yeah, is that a good thing? I think it is. I think that kind of stuff is pretty cool. But this is somebody finding something they already kind of like to do, and they get this religious justification for how they might do it. One of the things I talk about in both books is a lot of times the missions of the church are just the pet projects of people who want to do something, so the church just okays it, might give them some money or some space in the church to do what really is just a pet project. And I think sometimes it's completely appropriate for people to have private missions, but that might not necessarily mean it needs to be activated and done through the local church. There's a whole other church development angle to that problem I could talk about that I'm not going to talk about right now. But missions cannot be extracurricular activities, especially these ministries of mercy cannot be just extracurricular activities for the local church. They have to be a missional priority for the congregation, because the congregation coming together as the people of God recognize they have the unique ability to do something massively positive to affect a known issue in their community. And so oftentimes I think what this means is you've got to do one thing really, really, really well. And until it might not be an issue anymore, you might not need to add anything else to it. We're going to talk about this expanding idea when I share those questions with you later. And then go back to the justice piece. Sometimes we see and we say what we can do. And this doesn't mean we don't participate in it, but we know we don't have the ability to massively positively affect this issue. Sometimes also there are things that we might see on a national scale or on a global scale that we are deeply, deeply passionate about, and we want to do those things about it. But when we pull back into our Jerusalem, to our own immediate mission field, the issue's not there. The issue is not present. So, for example, for a long time, a lot of churches were dumping tons of resources into digging water wells in Africa. Very good thing. Very, very helpful thing. And I don't think churches shouldn't do that sort of stuff, but when that's their only big unified mission, they're missing out on what's in their Jerusalem. And they might want to ask the question, are there people in our immediate community who might not have access to clean water or good sewage or those sorts of things? Do we have a lot of homeless people in our community? Where are they drinking from? You see how you can take this big global idea, but also find a local way to affect it. So that's a justice thing. So those three questions, and I think these questions are very helpful as a church might be discerning, what is the thing that we can do? Because a lot of times in a small church, you can have one thing and do it really, really well, or you might just have a scatter load of different things that just are extracurricular activities. So the first question is this: is anyone hungry? That's a pretty big question. I think this is one of the easiest ways for local churches to positively affect their communities. Ask that question: is anyone hungry? And this has multiple layers to it as well. Do you have an unhoused or an indigent population in your community, and they literally do not know where the next meal comes from? Where I live right now, it's kind of interesting. It's a nicer town. I live in a nice part of town, but we have a lot of people who are unhoused here. And I thought about that this morning. I was like, wow, where can they go get food? What can I do about that? And what might the local church be able to do about that? You might be in a place where, okay, we don't have this immediate, easy next thing to ask, but we find out that in the school system, there's a lot of kids that don't eat when they go home on the weekend. So, and our school system might not have a backpack program to provide meals for those kids that they take home on Friday. They bring the backpack back on Monday. Okay, This might be something we need to spearhead and think about. And we might not be able to affect it at the entire school system or city or town level, but we can cooperate with the elementary school or the middle school that is the closest to our campus, and we can begin asking questions about how we might help that out. We might say we're going to hold an offering once a quarter, and we're going to clear out the school lunch debt. There's all sorts of things. You see this gradual expansion of how is this need a thing in your community. So that first question, is anyone hungry? The next one is very different, and I don't hear churches talking about this often, but is this: is anyone lonely? We have a massive epidemic of loneliness in our community. And I think this could be a very easy one for churches to solve, but they've got to figure out who lives around them and how they are specifically experiencing loneliness. And then what are some of the cultural affinity points that they might need or have that the church can easily provide for? So it might be, okay, we've got an apartment complex that's primarily populated by people in their 20s and they're single, a demographic that we know is incredibly lonely. Or we might have a senior population, or a senior citizen living place, or a senior center that's a day ministry at least. What can we do to go and help people that are lonely inside of that? We don't think about loneliness being an issue of mercy and justice, but I think it absolutely is. So ask yourself that question: is there anybody lonely around here in a larger systemic way? And what might we be able to do to touch what we can touch, to affect what we can affect in the most immediate and easy way? The third question is this: is there anyone who isn't safe? Now, this is a really, really broad category. This can talk about poverty. This can talk about folks who are unhoused. This can talk about single parents. This can talk about kids. This can talk about so many different groups of people, because we all experience safety in a very different way. And this isn't just a physical safety thing, but is there space for people to be emotionally safe? Is there a place for them to have clothes, if they have jackets? All of these sorts of questions. I think safety is a really, really broad categorization. And then again, we run the plan. We touch what we can touch. We touch it in the ways that is the closest to us and the easiest to affect. And when we have that figured out, when we have that done, when we have the ministry systems and stuff in place, only then do we ask, okay, now what else? It's a very simplified approach to this. So those three questions: is anyone hungry? Is anyone lonely? And is anyone not safe? Think about taking an hour with your leadership, or if your congregation's small enough, with an hour with your congregation, and start trying to ask those questions. Because what you might find coming out of it is, rather than a boatload of extracurricular activities masquerading as missions and ministry, you might find the ability to align yourself to a very specific thing that has the ability to very positively affect your local community. So if you like stuff like this, like I said earlier in the video, give this channel a like and subscribe. Subscribe to the email list and be part of this larger conversation that's getting built up about what does it mean for normal-sized churches to be affected very positively in ministry. So thanks so much. Let's hang out in the comments. I'm a big fan of that. If you're curious about these 2 books I've written, there's links to those books down in the description below as well. But I'm Chad Brooks. I love normal-sized local churches, and I believe that local churches are the best agent for the kingdom of God in our world today. I will see you back in the next video.